The lawyer's office smelled of expensive leather and lemon air freshener. My fingers gripped the thin file of documents so tightly that my knuckles turned white. 32 pages. 32 pages that would end 7 years of my marriage. It seemed unreal that all the pain, all the fights, all the tears had now been reduced to legal terms and signatures. Mrs. Everett, everything is ready. Peter Jenkins, my lawyer, handed me a pen. All you have to do is sign, and we can begin the process. His voice was soft but businesslike. He had seen people like me by the hundreds, confused, scared, but determined. I took the pen, feeling its unusual weight. One signature was going to divide my life into before and after. I, I began, but the words stuck in my throat. Do you need time? Peter asked. We can make an appointment for another day. I shook my head. There was no point in delaying the inevitable. If I left here without a signature, I would return to the same house, the same walls that had seen me slowly disappear, dissolve into other people's expectations. No, I said, sounding more confident than I felt. I'm ready. And then, as if on cue, the memory of that night flashed through my mind. The night that changed everything. It happened 3 weeks ago. I was coming home from work later than usual, but I couldn't help but smile. In my bag was an envelope with official confirmation of my promotion. Clinical research manager at West Farm, the position I had been dreaming of for the past 2 years. More responsibility, more opportunities, higher salary, and longer hours. The latter was the only thing that tarnished my joy. I knew that Noah would not be happy with the news. My husband was already complaining that I spent too much time at work. Now I would have to work even more, sometimes even on weekends. When I opened the door to our house, I was greeted by the smell of roasting meat and the sound of the TV. Noah, I called, taking off my shoes. In the kitchen, he replied. I entered the kitchen and saw Noah at the stove. He was grilling steaks, my favorite. A bottle of expensive wine was already open on the table. What are we celebrating? I asked, feeling the tension of the last few days slowly receding. Noah turned and smiled. Can I just make dinner for my wife? He came over to kiss me, but something about his behavior seemed strange, too perfect, too staged, like a scene from a romantic comedy where a man is trying to make amends for something. Did you get your test results back? I asked anxiously, remembering that Noah had gone to the doctor a few days ago. It's fine, he waved it off. I just wanted to do something nice. How was your day? And here it was, the perfect moment to tell him about the promotion. I took a deep breath. Actually, I have some news too, I began. Remember when I told you about the possible promotion? Well, it's officially mine. Starting next month, I'm a senior clinical research manager. I expected at least some fake joy, but Noah froze, spatula in hand. His smile slowly disappeared. Oh, he said, turning back to the steaks, congratulations. The coldness in his voice was so palpable that I felt as if I had been doused with ice water. Noah, what's wrong? He flipped the meat over, and I flinched at the sound of sizzling. Everything's fine, Megan. It's just fine. You know how much I love it when my wife is hardly ever home. We talked about this, I said carefully. It's an important step in my career. Of course, he said dryly, the most important thing in the world. I felt a heavy lump growing in my chest. All day I had been imagining how we would celebrate together, how Noah would be happy for me. Naively, of course. After 7 years of marriage, I should have gotten used to the fact that my professional achievements have never inspired his enthusiasm. He turned off the burner and turned to me. I saw something new in his eyes. Not just irritation, but real anger. What about what's important to me, Megan? What about the family that we keep putting off? First, I finish my studies. Then, first I get a job. Now, first I get a promotion. When will my time come? When will it be time for our children? I took a step back, stunned by the power of his words. We agreed to wait with the children, I reminded him quietly. Yes, when we were 23. We're 30 now, Megan. 30. So what do we do now? Are we going to wait until you get the Nobel Prize in pharmacology? His words hurt. We had indeed discussed the issue of children many times, but we always agreed that we were not ready yet. I didn't know you felt so urgent, I said. Noah laughed bitterly. Of course you didn't. You're never home long enough to notice what I want or feel. It wasn't fair. Yes, I worked a lot, but I always tried to find time for us. After all, I gave up a lot of my own desires and ambitions for this marriage, including the opportunity to work abroad a few years ago. That's not fair, Noah. I've always put our marriage first. Really? He crossed his arms over his chest. I blinked, not sure I heard him correctly. What? Turn down the promotion. Tell them you can't take on the extra responsibilities. Tell them you need more time for your family. I could not believe my ears. Was he seriously suggesting that I give up a career opportunity that I had been working towards for years? Noah, that doesn't make sense. I can't just. Can't or won't, he interrupted, because it seems like you can do anything when it comes to your precious career. I felt anger rising in me, a rare feeling for me, especially in my relationship with Noah. I was usually the one who backed down, who sought a compromise, who smoothed out the sharp edges. But not this time. It's not fair, my voice trembled. You know how hard I worked for this. You know what it means to me. What about what you mean to me? He suddenly shouted, pounding his fist on the tabletop. I want a wife, not a roommate who shows up from time to time. I want a mother for my children, not a career woman who considers family an obstacle. Every word he said was like a slap in the face. During our 7 years of marriage, of course, we fought. But never like this. Never had he spoken to me in such a tone. Never had he looked at me with such outright disgust. I never said that family was an obstacle, I whispered. But I also never said that I would give up my career. Noah took a deep breath, as if trying to calm himself. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but firm. You know, my mother never worked after she got married. She devoted herself to her family. And look how I grew up, how Audrey grew up. We're okay, right? We grew up in a complete family with a mother who was always there for us. I rolled my eyes. His mother, of course, Pamela Everett, the model wife and mother who never tired of reminding me how to run a home, how to please her son, how to be a real woman. For 7 years, I listened to her friendly advice. For 7 years, I smiled in response to her passive-aggressive comments about my work. We are not your parents, Noah. It's not about time, Megan. It's about values, he cut me off. In my family, women put family first. Always. No exceptions. Well, unfortunately, I'm not from your family. I come from a family where women can want more than just to be an appendage to a man. As soon as those words came out, I realized I had gone too far. Noah's face became cold and alien. Well, then maybe you should think about whether my family is right for you at all, he said slowly. My breath caught in my throat. He couldn't mean what I was thinking. He couldn't really be making me choose. Noah. No, Megan, that's enough. He held up his hand to stop me. I'm tired of this. Tired of being second best to your work. Tired of waiting for you to finally be ready to be a real wife and mother. He came closer, his eyes shining with anger. So choose either me or your career, because in my family, a woman should stay at home. Time seemed to stand still. I stood there, stunned, looking at the man I thought I knew, the man I had planned to spend the rest of my life with. And suddenly he became a stranger, as if a mask had fallen off, and I saw who he really was. You can't be serious, I whispered. I'm quite serious. His voice was cold and determined. Either you refuse the promotion, or he didn't finish, but he didn't have to. The ultimatum was clear. Thousands of thoughts raged in my head. Years of concessions, years of downplaying my own desires, years of trying to live up to an ideal that was not mine. And now that I had finally achieved something I could be proud of, he wanted me to give it up. I looked up and looked straight into Noah's eyes. Don't make me choose, Noah. You won't win. He laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. Oh, Megan, we both know you always take the path of least resistance. Always. And something inside me broke. Maybe it was the last straw. Perhaps it was the resentment that had accumulated over the years. Perhaps it was the realization that the person who was supposed to love me the most saw only weakness in me. Okay, I said quietly. I choose. Noah looked at me skeptically, already sure of his victory. He knew that I had always given in, always sought a compromise, always put his desires before mine. I choose myself, I continued, feeling every word give me strength. I choose my life. His face changed, first to surprise, then to disbelief, and finally to anger. You can't be serious, he said, repeating my own words. I am quite serious, I replied, repeating him. I will no longer diminish myself to make you feel bigger. I will no longer sacrifice my dreams for your comfort. Noah stared at me, obviously not expecting such a reaction. Megan, think about what you're saying. I thought for 7 years, Noah. 7 years of trying to be the person you wanted me to be. I'm done. I turned around and walked to the bedroom, feeling my heart beating so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I heard Noah following me, but I didn't stop. Are you seriously ready to destroy our marriage for a job? He exclaimed, standing in the bedroom doorway as I started to get my suitcase out of the closet. I turned to him. No, Noah. It is you who is destroying our marriage with your ultimatum. You are the one who is forcing me to choose. And yes, I've made my choice. Mrs. Everett? Peter's voice brought me back to reality. I took a deep breath and signed the documents. One by one, the divorce petition, an application for the division of property, and the last one was an eviction notice. This house has always been mine. I inherited it from my grandmother before I got married. Noah knew this, but he seemed to think he had the right to it just as much as I did. A week after our fight, he moved in with his parents, but he refused to take all his things, as if he was sure I would change my mind, that this was just another fight, after which I would give in, as usual. Fine, Peter said as he gathered up the documents. I'll personally deliver them to Mrs. Everett tonight. No, I shook my head. I'll do it myself. Peter raised his eyebrows in surprise. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said firmly. I have to do it. Driving to Noah's parents' house, I felt strangely calm. 3 weeks ago, I was broken, scared, unsure. But something had changed. Perhaps it was a moment of clarity when I finally saw our marriage for what it really was, not a partnership of equals, but a slow dissolution of me into someone else's expectations. I parked in front of the huge Everett house, a place that never felt like home, even during the many family dinners where I was forced to smile and remain silent. Grabbing my file, I got out of the car and walked to the door. Pamela, my mother-in-law, opened the door. Her impeccably styled hair and perfect makeup contrasted with the coldness in her eyes when she saw me. Megan, she said in a tone that usually means rat. Who is it, dear? Gareth, my father-in-law, a tall man with graying temples and a commanding look, appeared. He grimaced when he saw me. Oh, it's you. Good evening to you too, Gareth. I tried to sound calm. I've come to talk to Noah. I think you've talked enough, Pamela cut me off. He's finally starting to recover from your betrayal, I suggested. The terrible act of putting your own happiness before his? Pamela choked on her indignation, but before she could answer, Noah appeared. Megan? He looked tired, but there was hope in his eyes. You came? Yes, I handed him the folder. I came to give you this. What is it? Divorce papers, I answered calmly. And in order to evict you from my house, you have 7 days to take all your things. The silence that followed was deafening. Pamela froze with her mouth open. Gareth's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles in his face tense. And Noah looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time. You can't seriously? I'm being completely serious, Noah, I interrupted him. You gave me an ultimatum. I've made my choice. Now, live with the consequences. I turned to leave, but Noah grabbed my arm. Megan, wait. I didn't think. Let her go, Noah, Gareth suddenly said. If she doesn't understand what it means to be part of this family, we don't want that kind of daughter-in-law. I pulled my hand out of Noah's grip and looked directly into Gareth's eyes. You're right about one thing, Gareth. I have never been and will never be part of a family where a woman is expected to give up herself for a man. How dare you, Pamela exclaimed, after all we've done for you, after we accepted you despite your background. Oh yes, my background, the daughter of a laborer and a housewife. Obviously not good enough for the Everett family, but they had graciously accepted me, constantly reminding me of that. Thank you for your kindness, Pamela, I said, not hiding my sarcasm, but I don't need it anymore. As I walked back to my car, I could hear Pamela shouting after me, Noah trying to calm her down, Gareth telling everyone to shut up. But I didn't look back anymore. Getting behind the wheel, I looked at the Everett house one last time, and for the first time in 7 years, I felt like I could breathe fully. Sometimes I think that things might have turned out differently if Noah and I had met later. Perhaps I would have been an already formed person, not a plasticine from which his family was trying to mold the perfect daughter-in-law. But we met in my second year of university, when I was only 19 and he was 21. It was a Friday night and my roommate Jessica dragged me to a frat party. I was in the frat house, sandwiched between sweaty bodies with a warm beer and a plastic cup, when I spotted him, a tall guy with dark hair who looked just as out of place as I did. First time at a party like this? I asked, walking up to him. He laughed. Can you tell? His name was Noah Everett. I told him that I was studying pharmaceuticals and dreamed of working in a research laboratory. He listened with such interest as if I was telling him the most exciting story in the world. We talked for hours that night. My parents were thrilled when I brought Noah home for Thanksgiving. My mother, Diane, whispered to me in the kitchen that I had caught a goldfish. My father, Robert, who had worked in an automobile factory all his life, was amazed to learn that Noah's family owned a hotel chain on the East Coast. Hold on to him tight, girl, he said with a wink. You don't meet guys like that every day. The meeting with Noah's parents was different. Their house looked more like a museum than a home perfectly arranged furniture, antique paintings, crystal chandeliers. Pamela Everett greeted me with a cold smile and a piercing gaze that seemed to instantly assess my worth. Noah has told me so much about you, she said in a tone that didn't give away whether it was good or bad. He mentioned that your father works with his hands. He's a mechanic at a car factory, I answered, trying to sound proud. How interesting. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. And your mother? She's a housewife. This seemed to soften Pamela a bit. At least she knows her place. So many women in this world forget their true role. Gareth Everett, Noah's father, asked me a series of questions that were more like an interrogation. What was my specialization? What were my plans for the future? Why did I choose pharmacy and not something more appropriate for a woman? When I mentioned my scientific ambitions, he exchanged a look with his wife that made my face flush with shame. Noah didn't seem to notice the tense atmosphere. He hugged my shoulders, proudly told my parents about my academic achievements, and called me his little genius. But with each such praise, Pamela's eyes narrowed more and more. When we were getting ready to leave, she took Noah aside for a quick chat. I didn't hear what she said, but when we got into the car, Noah was quiet and thoughtful. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," he answered too quickly. "It's just that your mom is worried that you're too career-focused. She says that such women rarely make good wives and mothers." I felt something tighten inside me. "And what did you tell her?" He squeezed my hand. "That you would be an exception, of course." 2 years later, Noah proposed to me, with a diamond ring that must have cost more than my father's annual salary. My parents cried with joy. Noah's parents organized a lavish engagement party where I felt like an outsider even as an honored guest. The wedding was grand. Pamela took control of the planning, and what I had envisioned as a small ceremony turned into a social event with 300 guests, most of whom I did not know. After the honeymoon, Noah announced that his parents had helped us with a down payment on a house. But this was my grandmother's house, which she had left me as an inheritance. I planned to sell it and use the money to pay for graduate school, but Noah's parents insisted that it would be foolish. "It's a perfect family home," Pamela said. "It would be a shame to lose such a legacy." Noah took my hand and gently said, "Think about it, Megan. This could be our home, a place where our children will grow up." So I gave up my plans for graduate school and agreed to move to my grandmother's house. Pamela immediately set about updating the interior, replacing the antique furniture I loved with modern pieces that were more in line with her taste. This became the pattern of our life, small but constant concessions. I finished my bachelor's degree, but postponed graduate school when Noah got his first job at a financial firm. Instead, I took an entry-level position at West Farm, a small but promising pharmaceutical company. Noah was happy to have me working, but he often reminded me that my career needed to be flexible, ready to accommodate his career, which was clearly more important. "Someday when we have kids, you'll probably have to take a break," he would say, as if it were a given. Noah and I often visited his parents for dinner. These evenings always left me emotionally drained. Pamela had a knack for passive-aggressive comments disguised as friendly advice. "Megan, honey, that jacket is a little tight on you, isn't it? Maybe you should take better care of your figure now that you're married." Or, "Are you still working in that lab? How modern." Although I've always believed that the most important job for a woman is at home. Each such comment was a small pin that gradually deflated my self-confidence. And Gareth was no better. He rarely spoke to me directly, preferring to talk to Noah as if I wasn't in the room. "How will your wife handle the move if you get promoted to the New York office?" he would ask. "She doesn't have any serious career ambitions there, does she?" I learned to smile and keep quiet during these dinners. I learned to swallow my pride, my irritation, my anger. Noah didn't see anything wrong with his parents' behavior or didn't want to. "You're too sensitive," he said. "My mother just wants you to fit in." And my father, well, he's old-fashioned, but he doesn't mean anything bad. 3 years after we got married, I got the chance to go to Germany for a 6-week research program, a rare opportunity for someone in my position. When I told Noah, he seemed happy for me at first. But then, during dinner with his parents, "6 weeks?" Pamela looked shocked. "You're going to leave Noah alone for 6 weeks?" I tried to explain. It's a great opportunity for my career, I said. Noah, who had been supporting me, suddenly changed his tone. It's been a long time, Megan. What if I'm offered a promotion while you're gone? Under pressure, I withdrew from the program. When I announced my decision at the office, my supervisor, Dr. Lin, did not hide his disappointment. Megan, this program could have changed your career trajectory. Are you sure you want to turn it down? My husband, I began, feeling my cheeks flush with shame. It's not the right time for us to be away for such a long time. Over the years, I have learned to find small compromises to keep a part of myself. I worked hard, though not as ambitiously as I could have. I took on projects that didn't require travel or too much overtime. I learned how to be good enough at work to keep my job, but not so outstanding that it threatened my marriage. Meanwhile, Noah was thriving. He was promoted faster than his colleagues, partly because of his talent and partly because of his father's connections. He worked long hours, often came home late, and sometimes traveled for weeks at a time on business trips. And this was considered normal, even praiseworthy. He's so dedicated to his work, Pamela said proudly. When I would stay late at work, she would joke about poor Noah having to make his own dinner. I don't know when exactly I started losing myself. It happened gradually, like coastal erosion unnoticeable, until one day you find that half the land has disappeared. I stopped talking about graduate school. I stopped mentioning the possibility of working abroad. I began to take for granted that Noah's career was more important, that my ambitions should be in line with his needs. And yet, deep inside, a spark was smoldering, a small but stubborn part of me that refused to go out completely. I began to invest more in my work at West Farm, especially when the company began to expand and opened a new research department. When the opportunity to be promoted to senior clinical research manager came up 7 years after our wedding, I couldn't say no. It was everything I had dreamed of, a job that would allow me to participate in the development of new medicines, a job that mattered. But when I told Noah about it, I saw a familiar shadow in his eyes. You know, my mother called yesterday, he said the evening after I shared the news. I gritted my teeth. And what did you tell her? That we're working on it. He looked at me meaningfully. But, Megan, she's 65 now. She wants to see her grandchildren while she can still play with them. A few days later, Noah came home with a strange smile. I had lunch with my parents today, he said. They asked about your possible promotion. I tensed. And what did you tell them? The truth. That you have a chance to get a new position that will take up even more of your time. He shrugged as if it were obvious. Dad thinks it's not normal. Not normal? I repeated, feeling anger building in my chest. That my mother never put her ambitions before the needs of her family. Noah looked at me as if expecting me to agree. And he's right, Megan. Look at how I grew up. My mom was always home, always there for me. Is that what you want? I asked quietly. A wife who has no life of her own? No goals of her own? Noah looked at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. I want a wife who puts her family first. Is that too much to ask? I did not answer. But that night, lying in bed next to my husband, who was sleeping peacefully, I realized that I was at a crossroads, and whatever my choice was, it would change my life forever. The day after I handed Noah the divorce papers passed in strange silence. Not a single call, not a single message. I was expecting an outburst, begging, threats, anything but this oppressive silence. It was not like Noah and not like his family at all, especially Pamela, who never missed an opportunity to speak her mind. I came home from work feeling inexplicably anxious. The house was quiet and empty, but there was something in the air, like the calm before the storm. I took a shower, changed into my home clothes, and was about to order a mail delivery when I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside my house. I looked out the window and saw Gareth's big black SUV. My heart skipped a beat. Not only Noah, but the entire Everett family had arrived for negotiations. Gareth and Pamela got out of the car, followed by Noah, and then, to my surprise, Audrey, his younger sister. I had always considered Audrey the most normal of the Everett family. She was 5 years younger than Noah, studied architecture in Europe, and seemed to be the least supportive of her parents' ideals of womanhood. But apparently, when it came to the family crisis, even Audrey followed the rule, blood is thicker than water. The doorbell rang like a shot in the silence of the house. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and went to answer it. Megan? Noah stood in the front, looking tired and tense. We need to talk. Behind him, I could see the other Everetts standing with grim faces like a funeral procession. All of you? I asked, not making a move to step back and let them through. This is about the whole family, Gareth interjected, stepping forward. You're destroying our son's marriage, and we have a right to be part of that conversation. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. It was typical of Gareth to assume that his son was incapable of solving his own problems. Please, Megan, Noah said quietly. Dash, just listen to us. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces, but the other part of me, the part that was used to being the good Megan, the compliant Megan, couldn't do that. Fine, I finally said, backing away, but I'm not changing my mind. They entered the house one by one. Gareth, as always, led the procession, his broad shoulders radiating confidence and authority. He was followed by Pamela, slim and elegant even in this tense situation. Noah looked like he would rather be anywhere but here. Audrey closed the procession, giving me a look I couldn't decipher, something between sympathy and disappointment. I led them into the living room, a room that Pamela had modernized to her liking, replacing her grandmother's warm, cozy furniture with modern, stylish, but uncomfortable pieces. They settled down, Gareth and Pamela on the couch, Noah in an armchair, Audrey on the edge of another armchair. Would you like something to drink? I asked automatically, out of habit, playing the role of a hospitable hostess. We're not at a social gathering, Megan, Pamela cut me off. We're here to discuss your irrational behavior. My behavior seems perfectly rational to me, I replied, sitting down in the chair across from them. Noah gave me an ultimatum. I made my choice. Noah was simply expressing a reasonable expectation of his wife, Gareth interjected. I turned to Noah. Is that your opinion or your father's? Noah looked uncomfortable, glancing between me and his father. Megan, you know I've always supported your work, he began. I just want a normal family, kids, a wife who will be there when I come home. And what does this have to do with my promotion? I asked. The new position will mean more hours at work, more responsibility, more stress, Noah replied. Unlike you, I couldn't help myself. You only work 5 hours a week, right? Gareth slammed his fist on the table. That's not the case. Noah is a man. Doesn't my salary count? I asked. Of course it counts, dear, Pamela said sweetly, but her eyes remained cold. You'll never make as much as Noah. It's just biology. Men are built for work. Women are built for home. I could barely stop myself from laughing in her face. Had this woman really just tried to use biology as an argument? Pamela, what century are you living in? I asked. Don't you dare talk to my mother in that tone of voice, Noah suddenly shouted, and I saw Pamela smile smugly. She's just expressing an opinion that most normal people share. Normal? I repeated. So I'm not normal because I want a career and a personal life? You're not normal because you put work before family, Gareth interjected. These words hit me like a slap in the face. For 7 years of marriage, I tried to be the perfect wife for Noah. I gave up graduate school, the opportunity to work abroad, and many projects that required travel. I cleaned, cooked, supported his career, and put up with his parents. Your son deserves a wife who will be happy, I said quietly. And I can't be happy if I give up a part of myself. You're being dramatic as usual, Pamela muttered. No one is asking you to give up part of yourself. Just put your career on hold for a few years. Have children. Be a mother. It's natural. Natural for whom? I asked. For you? I'm not you, Pamela. You've always hated her, Noah suddenly said, his face reddening with anger. Always envied her, her success as a mother, as a wife. I was shocked. Jealous? I never wanted to be like your mother, Noah. Never. Pamela inhaled sharply, as if I had just hit her. Gareth tensed, ready to defend his wife's honor. How dare you? He hissed. After everything we've done for you. We accepted you into our family, even though you're clearly not one of us. We tried to help you become better than you are. Dash accepted? I almost laughed. You never accepted me. You tolerated me, hoping that you could change me, turn me into a puppet that would dance to your tune. But guess what? I'm not a puppet, and I don't need your approval to know my worth. There was dead silence. I had never spoken to them like this before. I had always been polite, compliant, trying to be liked. And now, when I finally said what was on my mind, they looked at me like I was an outsider. Megan, Audrey said quietly, for the first time since the meeting began, I understand that you're upset, but don't you think divorce is too drastic a step? Maybe you should try counseling. Her voice sounded reasonable, conciliatory. But I could see Pamela smile triumphantly. She knew that Audrey, the family favorite, could reach me where they couldn't. E-counseling won't help, Audrey, I replied. Noah wants a wife who will put his needs before hers. I can't be that wife, at least not anymore. You knew what you were getting into when you got married, Pamela interjected. You knew what our family values were. I knew your son said he loved me, I replied. I thought that meant he loved me for who I was, not who he wanted me to be. I did love you, Noah said, his voice softening for a moment. But you've changed, Megan. You've become colder, more ambitious. I haven't changed, Noah. I shook my head. You just chose to ignore it, thinking that in time I would outgrow my ambition, as your mother always predicted. Ah, we're wasting time, Gareth interjected. Megan, you signed these documents in a moment of emotional excitement. Don't do something stupid that will ruin your life. Withdraw the divorce petition, talk to Noah, find a compromise. Compromise? I asked again. I give up my career, have children, and become a housewife? That's not a compromise, Gareth. It's a surrender. Don't be so dramatic, Pamela said. Millions of women are happy in that role. But I'm not, I said firmly. And if you really loved me as part of your family, you'd want me to be happy, not just meet your expectations. That's selfish, Noah said. What about you? I asked, turning to him. Isn't it selfish to ask me to give up my dreams for your comfort? It's different, Gareth interjected. He has the right to. No, I interrupted him, feeling anger rising inside me. Don't you dare start with that Noah is a man argument again. This is the 21st century, not the 18th. I have the same rights and ambitions as he does, and if he can't accept that, then our marriage really has no future. Do you see what I have to put up with? Noah turned to his parents. This feminist who doesn't respect the natural order of things. Natural order? I couldn't believe my ears. You've never spoken of the natural order before, Noah. Those are your father's words, not yours. Don't blame my father, Noah snapped. He's right. He always has been. I should have listened to him 7 years ago when he said you weren't right for our family. There was silence. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my stomach. What did you say? I asked quietly. Noah looked like he regretted what he had said, but it was too late. My father had doubts about our marriage, he said reluctantly. He thought you were too independent, too career-oriented for our family. And you knew this all along? I asked, feeling the pain in my chest grow. You knew your father never approved of me, and yet you let me try to earn his respect. Let me feel like I wasn't good enough, year after year. I thought you would change his mind, Noah answered quietly. That you'd prove to him that you could be a good wife, despite your idiosyncrasies. Quirks, I repeated, feeling the tears coming to my eyes. But I didn't let them spill. 7 years I've been trying to prove that I'm good enough for all of you. 7 years I've been shrinking myself to fit your idea of a proper wife. And all this time, you never planned to accept me for who I am. Don't twist my words, Noah began, but I held up a hand to stop him. I think it's time for you all to go, I said, standing up. We're not going anywhere until you get your head straight, Gareth said, also standing up. You're not going to ruin this marriage for your career fantasies. It's not your decision, I replied, trying to sound calm. This is my home, and I'm asking you to leave. Your home? Pamela laughed a high, unpleasant laugh. He has just as much right to be here. Actually, no, I answered. This house belongs to me. I inherited it from my grandmother before we got married, and if you check the documents I gave Noah, you will see that there is an eviction order. He has 7 days to get his things and find a new place to live. Gareth's face flushed with anger. You can't just throw my son out on the street. I'm giving him a week, I replied. That's more than generous considering the circumstances. We're not leaving, Pamela said, crossing her arms over her chest. Not until you come to your senses and withdraw these ridiculous papers. I took a deep breath. I knew that a calm conversation would get me nowhere. Then you leave me no choice, I said, pulling out my phone. What are you doing? Noah asked tensely. I'm calling the police, I replied, dialing the number, because you're refusing to leave my house voluntarily. You wouldn't dare, Pamela hissed, but I had already put the phone to my ear. Emergency services, what's your emergency? Came the voice of the dispatcher. I need help, I said clearly. I dictated my address, feeling the shocked looks of the Everett family. The police will be there in a few minutes, the dispatcher said. Stay on the line if the situation gets worse. Thank you, I replied and hung up. You're crazy, Noah whispered, looking at me as if I were a stranger. Calling the police on your family? You're not my family anymore, I replied calmly. You realized that yourself today? You never considered me part of your family. I was a project, an experiment that failed. Is that what you think? Audrey suddenly interjected, her eyes glittering with anger. That we never considered you family? Then why did I spend every weekend with you when my heart was broken? Why did Mom organize a surprise for you on your birthday last year? Why did Dad use his connections to help your father get a better pension? I froze. What do you mean? I asked, looking at Gareth. He grimaced, clearly unhappy that this information had come up. It doesn't mean anything. Just a couple of calls, thanks to which my father received a full pension, not a partial one, I guessed. They never told me about it. Noah never mentioned it. You see, Pamela said triumphantly, we took care of you, of your family, and you repay us by betraying us. It's not betrayal, I replied quietly. It's self-defense, and if you really cared about me, you would want me to be happy, not just obedient. The sound of a police siren interrupted our conversation. Pamela's face turned white with shock and anger. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. "We could have ruined your career with one phone call." "Try it," I replied, feeling the adrenaline pulsing through my veins. "And I'll sue you for threats and intimidation. I don't think it would be good for your reputation in the community." Gareth grabbed Pamela's arm. "Come on. We don't need to humiliate ourselves anymore." Noah was the last to stand, looking at me with a mixture of anger and confusion. "I don't recognize you, Megan." "That's because you've never seen the real me, Noah," I replied. When the police car pulled up in front of the house, the Everett family finally got out. I stood in the doorway, watching them get into their luxury SUV and drive away. Pamela didn't look back. Gareth looked at me with undisguised disgust. Audrey gave me a last sad look. And Noah? Noah just looked devastated. I explained the situation to the police, two tired officers who seemed to have seen enough family drama not to be surprised. They took down my statement, confirmed that the eviction order was legally valid, and advised me to change the locks if I was afraid Noah might return without my permission. When they left, I closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling my body shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. But underneath that trembling was something else, a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in a long, long time. The first week of being alone in my own house was the hardest. Noah took his things in 3 days. I specifically took time off to avoid seeing him. When I returned home, half of the closet was empty. Some books, his watch collection, photos with the Everett family were gone. It was as if someone had cut out part of the house, leaving strange voids. The silence in the evenings was deafening. I turned on the TV just for the background noise, filled the void with music, podcasts, anything that could drown out the thoughts in my head. Did I make the right decision? Did I cut everything short too abruptly? Will I regret it in a few months or years? These doubts grew stronger every time I talked to my parents. My mother, who had spent her entire life teaching me to be independent, suddenly started talking about compromise and patience. "Megan, honey," she said during our Sunday phone call, "marriage is work. Sometimes you have to give in." "Mom, he wanted me to give up my career," I reminded her. "That's not compromise. That's surrender." "But he provided for you," she sighed. "You lived so well." "I provide for myself," I replied, feeling anger mingling with frustration. My father was even more blunt. "You did a stupid thing, daughter," he said in a tone that did not tolerate denial. "Noah is a good boy from a good family. You don't find the likes of him anymore." I didn't tell him about Gareth's pension fraud or Pamela's threats. I didn't want him to feel guilty or obligated, but his disappointment hurt more than I expected. Even worse was the judgment from our mutual friends, the people we had dinners with, went on vacations with, celebrated birthdays with, suddenly split into Team Noah and a much smaller Team Megan. The phone rang less often, invitations to parties stopped, and when I did meet some of my old friends, I always felt an unspoken question: how could you? One evening, I ran into Brendan and Kara, a married couple I used to hang out with, at the supermarket. They looked confused when they saw me, and after some awkward greetings, Kara couldn't help herself. "We heard about the situation," she said, glancing at her husband. "Noah looks really shattered." "I'm not happy either," I replied, trying to sound calm. "But you did it," Brendan said with an aggression I didn't understand. "Noah said you just put your work before your marriage." "Noah said?" I asked again, feeling my pulse quicken. Kara was clearly uncomfortable. "He's just upset, Megan. He says you've changed, that you've become cold and career-obsessed. And you just believed him." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "You've known me for 7 years and you just believed his side of the story without asking me." Well, you don't deny that you chose the job over him. Brendan shrugged. I glanced at their cart full of party food chips, dip, wine. Are you having guests tonight? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. They exchanged quick glances, confirming my suspicions. Just a little get together, Kara answered uncertainly. Nothing special. And Noah's invited, but I'm not. I finished for them. We just didn't want to create an awkward situation, Brendan muttered, not looking me in the eye. Of course. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. I turned around and left, leaving my half-empty basket at the cash register. The tears came later, at home, when I sat in the kitchen with a glass of wine, looking at the empty wall where our wedding photos used to hang. It was not easy at work either. My promotion to senior clinical research manager was official, but the joy of it was marred by whispers behind my back. Maybe that's why her marriage broke up. She's too ambitious for her own good. I wonder if she thinks it's worth it. I heard these comments as I walked through the corridors, in the cafeteria, even in the women's restroom when two lab assistants didn't notice me in the stall. The saving grace was the unexpected support from Richard Haley, the head of the biostatistics department. We had rarely crossed paths before my promotion, but now we were to work closely together on clinical trials for a new drug. Congratulations on your promotion, he said during our first meeting. Your work with the Phase 3 protocols for liposomal doxorubicin was impressive. His sincerity caught me off guard. In recent weeks, I'd become so accustomed to the hidden laughs and judgmental glances that I'd almost forgotten what it was like to be appreciated for your work and not your personal life. Thank you, I replied, trying not to look too surprised. It was a challenging project. And you did a brilliant job, he nodded, especially considering your personal circumstances. I tensed, ready for more criticism or curiosity. But Richard added gently, I went through a divorce 3 years ago. I know how exhausting it is, especially when you have to continue to function professionally. Something in his tone, not pity, but genuine understanding, made me relax. Thank you, I said again, this time sincerely. The last few weeks have been difficult. Richard was in his mid-40s, with a little gray at the temples and kind eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. He didn't look like a typical statistician. He spoke animatedly, often joked, and knew how to explain complex concepts in simple terms. And he was a single father raising his 9-year-old daughter, Ellie, after a divorce. We started having lunch together, first discussing work issues, then gradually moving on to personal topics. He talked about his daughter, the challenges of being a single parent, and how he balances work and family. The hardest thing to accept was that I can't be perfect in everything, he said one day over lunch. I can't be a perfect father, an outstanding scientist, and not lose myself. I had to recognize that sometimes good enough is really good enough. These words touched me deeply. All my life I have been trying to be perfect, the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect employee, and when I couldn't meet all of these standards at the same time, I felt like a failure. How did you come to terms with that? I asked. Richard laughed. Who said I came to terms with it? I struggle with it every day, but you know what helped? Therapy, and lots of it. Therapy. This word has always caused me internal resistance. My family didn't talk about mental health. Problems were solved on their own, without taking the trash out of the house. And in the Everett family, the idea of therapy was generally perceived as a sign of weakness. I never thought about it, I admitted. Think about it, Richard gently advised. It doesn't mean you're weak or broken. It means you're strong enough to ask for help when you need it. The next day, I made an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Marcia Lee was a middle-aged woman with a penetrating gaze and a calm voice. She did not try to give me ready-made answers or judge my decisions. Instead, she asked questions that forced me to dig deeper than I had ever dared. "Tell me about your relationship with Noah," she asked during our first session. "Not the end, but the beginning. What attracted you to him?" I thought about it. He was kind. He was attentive. When we met, it seemed to me that he really saw me, understood me, and he was so confident. He knew what he wanted from life. What do you think attracted him to you? This question caught me off guard. I always thought about what Noah gave me, but rarely about what I gave him. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Maybe it was because I was different, not in his circle. Maybe it was exotic for him." "Did you ever ask him about it?" "No," I admitted. I think I was afraid the answer would disappoint me. With each session, I gained a deeper understanding of the patterns that had been running my life. How the early loss of my grandmother, the only person who truly supported my ambitions, shaped my need for approval. How I learned to diminish myself so as not to threaten the male ego, first my father, then Noah. How I looked to Noah for the protection and confidence I didn't have on my own. "It seems you were both looking for very different things in your marriage," Dr. Lee observed in our fifth session, "and you were looking for recognition of your value and the right to be yourself." Her words were painful, but true. Noah and I had never really talked about our expectations of marriage, our values, or the kind of life we wanted to build together. We just fell in love and then drifted along with the flow of circumstances and other people's expectations. At work, I also had to face new challenges. My first major presentation to the board of directors was almost ruined when I noticed a familiar man in the audience, William Pierce, Gareth Everett's longtime business partner. He obviously recognized me. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I was filled with paralyzing fear. Would he use his influence to sabotage my presentation? Would he mention my scandalous divorce? But I remembered Richard's words about how sometimes you just have to do your best and let go of the outcome. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and began to speak, clearly, confidently, professionally. And gradually, the fear receded, giving way to what I did best, my work. After the presentation, William came up to me, and I prepared for a confrontation. "Impressive work, Mrs. Sorry, Ms. Everett," he said. "Thank you," I replied dryly. "I'm Megan Wilson now." He nodded, studying me with his eyes. "Gareth mentioned changes in your personal life." "I'm sure he did," I replied, holding my head high. "But I hope we can keep personal matters out of the professional context." To my surprise, William smiled. "I absolutely agree. In fact, I wanted to offer you the opportunity to collaborate with our pharmaceuticals division on a new drug for the treatment of autoimmune diseases. It was an unexpected opportunity that could significantly advance my career, and it came from someone I considered a potential adversary. Later, when I told Richard about it, I was still surprised. "I thought he was going to try to destroy me," I admitted. "He's a friend of Gareth's, but he's also a businessman," Richard replied, "and he seems to understand the value of talent regardless of personal connections. Or he's just not as close to Gareth as I thought," I added. Richard thought about it. "You know what I've noticed over the years in this industry? Often we attribute to people much more power over our lives than they actually have. Maybe Gareth isn't as powerful as you feared. Or maybe people just see your value regardless of what he says." This thought was both frightening and liberating. If Gareth and Pamela didn't have the power I feared, it meant that I had let my fear of them guide my decisions for far longer than necessary. But it also meant that I could finally stop living in the shadow of their judgment. 3 months after starting therapy, I felt that something fundamental had changed in me. I still had moments of doubt. I still sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, feeling empty next to me in bed. But the fear gradually receded, and something new grew in its place. a sense of self-worth and dignity that did not depend on other people's approval. A year. A whole year has passed since the day I handed Noah the divorce papers. Sometimes it seemed like yesterday. Sometimes it seemed like another life. Standing in front of the mirror in my newly remodeled bedroom, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. The same appearance, but a different look. Confident, calm, without the shadow of the constant anxiety that had haunted me for years. Today was a special day. My father's birthday, his 65th. My relationship with my parents had gradually improved over the past few months. At first, there were awkward phone conversations filled with hesitations, then short visits during which we carefully avoided painful topics. But time and my therapy helped. I learned to set boundaries, to explain my feelings without blaming. And, most importantly, I learned not to look for their approval of my every move. At work, everything was going better than I could have dreamed. 3 months ago, I was promoted to Clinical Research Director, a position I didn't dare to think about a year ago. The project I was leading in collaboration with William Pierce's company brought West Farm a significant contract and me recognition in the industry. And then there was Richard. Our friendship gradually grew into something more. It happened naturally, without drama or excessive expectations. He understood my need for space and independence, and I respected his devotion to his daughter Ellie, who, by the way, turned out to be a smart and funny girl. "Are you ready?" Richard asked, appearing in the bedroom doorway. He was wearing a simple white shirt and jeans, his glasses slightly pushed down his nose. "Ellie's already waiting in the car, and she's very excited about the gift." I smiled, remembering how the three of us had chosen a toolkit for my father. Ellie had insisted that each tool be wrapped separately to make it more fun to unwrap. "I'm ready," I said, taking one last look at my reflection. "I'm just a little nervous." Richard came closer and put his arm around my shoulders. "Because of your parents?" "No, they're fine now." I shook my head. "I just don't know who else will be there." We both knew what I was talking about. My parents kept in touch with Noah even after the divorce. They adored him, and despite all my explanations, part of me feared they still held me responsible for the collapse of the marriage. "If he's there, we'll just be polite and focus on your father," Richard said simply. His practicality was one of the things I appreciated most about him. No drama, no overreactions, just a calm acceptance of reality and a search for the best solution. When we arrived at my parents' house, there were already several cars there. My heart leapt when I spotted a familiar silver sedan, Noah's car. So he was really here. Ellie jumped out of our car first, holding brightly wrapped presents in her hands. "This is going to be your dad's best birthday ever," she declared with childlike confidence. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I felt the tension ease a little. My mom met us at the door, hugging me first, then Richard, and then, especially warmly, Ellie, who had quickly won her heart. "They're all in the yard," my mom said, nodding to the back of the house. "Your dad's firing up the grill as usual." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Noah's here. With a girl. I didn't know he was bringing her, or I would have told you." "It's okay, Mom." I squeezed her hand. "We're adults now." She nodded, but her eyes were worried. Richard quietly took my hand as we walked out into the backyard. I saw him right away. Noah was standing by the grill next to my father, laughing at something he had said. Next to him stood a slender brunette in a simple summer dress. Pretty, but not striking. She looked nice and quite ordinary. Not like the perfect girls Pamela Everett had approved of. My father saw us first. His face lit up with a sincere smile, and he waved his grill spatula. "There's my girl." I went to hug him and introduced Ellie, who immediately started talking about the gifts. Noah and his companion stood a little to the side, and when I finally looked up, our eyes met. Hi, Megan, he said, his voice neither bitter nor tense. Long time no see. Hi, Noah, I replied, surprised at my own calmness. This is Lindsay, he introduced his companion. Lindsay, this is Megan, my ex-wife, she finished with a slight smile, extending her hand. Noah has told me a lot about you. I shook her hand, trying to figure out what I was feeling. Jealousy, number, relief, maybe. But most of all, curiosity. This woman didn't look like a Pamela Everett type. I hope it's not all bad, I joked. Actually, no, she replied, surprising me. He speaks of you with respect. Noah shrugged, showing a little embarrassment. A year and a good therapist can do wonders. A therapist? I couldn't hide my surprise. Yeah, he nodded. I was in a bad way after our breakup. My parents insisted that I should just pull myself together and find a better wife. But I realized that I didn't want to make the same mistakes. I didn't know what to say. The Noah who goes to a therapist? The Noah who admits his mistakes? It was so unlike the man I'd been with for 7 years. I'm glad you're happy, Megan, he added, nodding toward Richard, who was talking to my father. He seems like a good man. He is, I confirmed. And what about your parents? Do they know about Lindsay? A shadow passed over his face. They do. And they're not too happy about it. Lindsay's a social worker. Not exactly the cream of the crop, as my mother would say. And that doesn't bother you? I asked cautiously. Noah looked at Lindsay, who was now talking to my mom. You know, it's weird, but no. She taught me a lot about true values, that it's not what other people think that matters, but how you feel about yourself. Who are you and what have you done with Noah Everett? I laughed, but not angrily. He laughed too. Therapy, Megan, and the painful realization that I had been living up to other people's expectations for most of my life. Our conversation was interrupted by Ellie, who came running in, insisting that it was time for presents. We joined the others, and the rest of the day was surprisingly comfortable. Noah and I weren't friends, but we weren't enemies either. We were just two people with a common past who were on different paths. Later, as we drove home, Ellie falling asleep in the back seat while Richard drove, I looked out the window at the stars appearing in the evening sky. What are you thinking about? He asked quietly. How strange life is, I replied. A year ago, I thought my life was over. And now? And now? Now I realize that it is just beginning. When we arrived home, Richard took a sleepy Ellie to the guest room, which was gradually becoming her own. On the kitchen table, I noticed a bouquet of freesias, my favorite flowers. Is there a holiday today? I asked when Richard returned. He came over and hugged me from behind. You don't have to have a reason for flowers. Although, today is exactly 6 months since we officially started dating. I turned in his arms. And you remember the exact date? Of course, he answered seriously. It was an important day in my life. I touched his face, feeling infinite gratitude for this man who saw me as I really was and loved me for who I was. Do you know what I realized today? I asked. What? That I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid to be alone. I'm not afraid to disappoint others. I'm not afraid to be not good enough. Richard smiled. Dash, dash. You've always been good enough, Megan. It's just that you know it now. I thought about the journey I've taken this year, about the woman I used to be, scared, insecure, ready to shrink to meet other people's expectations, and about the woman I have become, a strong, holistic woman who knows her value. The house, once filled with tense silence and hidden resentment, now became my territory, a place where I could be myself, without a mask, without compromise on issues that mattered to me. And most importantly, I no longer allowed anyone to determine my value or make decisions for me. It was my territory, not just this house, but my life, and now I knew I would never give up control of it again.